Good evening.
Good evening. Everybody's here. I guess we can start.
Okay.
Welcome to the March meeting of the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. As usual, let's begin the meeting with a roll call. In this way, we can help the audience better understand who we are and what the meeting is about. And it'll also allow our management assistant, Jeanette, to determine whether or not we have a quorum. Should we please, everybody, state your name and your role in this meeting? Linda, do you want to start?
Hi, everybody. Linda Winkler, Commissioner.
Diana?
Hi, everybody. Commissioner Diana Cass.
Pam?
Pam Dent, Commissioner.
Keita?
Peter Cowan, Commissioner.
Judah?
Judah Garber, Commissioner.
Travis?
Travis Redina, Council Liaison from Ward 3.
Aisha?
Aisha Garzi Edwin, Commissioner.
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Nelson, City Council Liaison.
And Naomi?
LGBT Liaison to the Mayor's Office.
Denise?
Denise Janelle, Staff Liaison.
And finally, our newest commissioner, Aiden Sova.
Aiden Sova, Commissioner.
Aiden, would you mind saying a few words about yourself? We're happy to have you here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Aiden Sova. I am a graduating senior at the University of Michigan, where I study communication and media. I currently sit on the Coronavirus Community Action Task Force at the request of the Lieutenant Governor, and I'm also a Emerging Leaders Council member for the Legal Services Corporation as well. Following graduation, I will be in Ann Arbor to work full-time at Google at their Ann Arbor location and continue my work here in the Human Rights Commission. And I'm, again, thrilled to be here and thankful for the opportunity.
Great. I think we're all thrilled to have you. Welcome. And I'm Leslie Stambon. I'm the chair.
Leslie, this is Pam.
Yes, Pam.
You forgot Dillip.
Dillip. Did I forget? I'm sorry. You should have said something. Dillip, please introduce yourself.
No problem. Dillip Das, Commissioner. Thank you.
I'm sorry. This keeps changing, you know. Did I forget anybody else? Judah, did I forget you?
No. Okay.
Okay. I keep trying to find a better way to do that.
Well, we have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
Yeah.
That's good. So the next thing on our agenda is public comment. And this time is reserved for members of the community to speak to the Human Rights Commission. We can give them up to 3 minutes apiece. They speak without interruption. If we have any questions of any speaker, please hold it until all the speakers have spoken. And remember who you want to ask the question to. Denise Janess, our host and management assistant, will be the time for all the speakers, and she will manage this whole thing. Denise.
Okay. We have a question in the box, and I have a speaker. Okay. Ms. Herbert?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll go ahead with my statement. Hello, my name is Marjorie Herbert. I'm a resident of Washtenaw County, and I'm commenting today to voice my support for immediately prioritizing COVID-19 vaccines for people with disabilities in Washtenaw. I identify as disabled and experience some chronic fatigue and pain, which can make the basic sanitation and hygiene needed to be safe during the pandemic very difficult. So me and folks like me of any age are more likely to contract the disease. We are also more likely to have one or more of the conditions associated with severe illness from COVID by the CDC, including COPD, type 2 diabetes, and heart conditions, among many more. The broader Michigan disability community has faced immeasurable loss this year due to this pandemic, and especially immeasurable loss of Black disabled lives. While us in the community are used to this kind of loss, as inaccessible housing, education, healthcare, work opportunities, and the stress of living under those oppressive conditions continues to shorten the lives of too many disabled Michiganders. But the pandemic has brought loss to a new level, and disproportionately, Black disabled Michiganders have been feeling this. We've lost thousands of disabled Michiganders and a disproportionate number of Black disabled Michiganders already. I'm urging you to stem the tide of loss and follow Detroit's lead by immediately prioritizing people with disabilities in Washtenaw for the vaccine rollout. 1 in 4 Black Americans have a disability. As I've said, people with disabilities are more likely to contract the disease. It has also been well documented that Black Americans have higher hospitalization rates and death rates once they contract COVID. So this is really a racial justice issue as well. Thank you for your time. I hope you'll take action to immediately prioritize people with disabilities in Washtenaw.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Nolish.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic, cool. I'm a few minutes late, I apologize. How long do we have to speak today?
3 minutes, please.
Okay, cool, let me get my little phone going. I appreciate your patience with me.
That's okay, I have a timer.
Okay, ready.
Ready.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jeffrey Nolish. I am the policy director for Detroit Disability Power. We are a disability justice organization based out of Detroit, Michigan, dedicated to building the political power of people with disabilities throughout Metro Detroit, including Washtenaw County. The reason I am here is very much tied to civil rights and human rights. I just got off a Wayne County town hall about prioritization. And I can't tell you how difficult it is to be a self-advocate with disability or to be an advocate for disability in general in this moment in time. We know that people with Down syndrome are 10 times more likely to die if they acquire COVID-19. We know that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are 3 times more likely to die. We know that people with schizophrenia are almost 3 times likely to die. And people with autism are at a greater likelihood of dying all if they acquire or contract COVID-19. On top of that, there are numerous factors that affect people with disabilities. Things like physical barriers to accessing hygiene, or difficulty enacting social distancing, or the need to touch things for information or for physical support, or barriers to accessing public health information and care, and aggravation of underlying health conditions. And some specific examples of these things are my colleague Teddy, who is Black and deaf, and our communications manager having to rely on certified American Sign Language interpreters when there is a shortage in Michigan, or having a need to see lips that are covered by masks. And it's very difficult to do so, to read that when you're social distancing, right? So things that make logical sense, science, right? To be able to not have an earlier prioritization for people with disabilities for COVID-19 access is amazingly frustrating. I named the data, I named the risks. You know, the city of Detroit right now, as of February 11th, has taken the leadership step in being able to vaccinate people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our city, where I reside, has vaccinated 848 people as of 9 a.m. this morning. And it is beautiful and it is amazing, and it is not happening anywhere else in this state right now. So you can imagine how emotionally taxing it is to come to anybody that is willing to listen, to fight for people with disabilities. And we know there are arguments. Oh, the supply. Oh, but the CDC says. But there's a lot of passing the buck. And when Maryland, Ohio, New Mexico, New York, South Carolina, North Carolina, Utah have all found a way to prioritize people with disabilities for vaccine access under the same constraints, why not Michigan? Why not Washtenaw County? Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, time's up. Thank you.
Are there any other?
Yes, I have one more.
Okay.
Ms. McGurney?
Hello.
Hello?
My name is Pam McGinty, and I
Yes.
am a resident of Washington County. So I identify as a person with disability. I'm here to speak out on the prioritization of people with disabilities for getting vaccination. There's a lot of different challenges that both Jeff and Marjorie mentioned. I'm also a person with a hearing loss that has difficulty understanding people wearing masks. And there's been many times when I've been out in public, I've had to ask people to pull the mask down in order to communicate, or I've done it voluntarily. And that puts me at risk every time I try to have a conversation with somebody. And there's many other people with other different types of disabilities that are high risk for, other sorts of ailments. So it's really important for us to prioritize that to make sure that everybody can stay healthy in our county and keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that the end, Pam, Denise?
Yes, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
A minute, let me see. I have a question down here in the Q&A.
Okay.
Oh, okay. No, that's Ms. Herbert. You spoke. Okay, we're good.
Okay, are there any questions for our three speakers? Marjorie, Denise, and Jeffrey. Linda?
I have one. I may be mistaken, but before this meeting, I went to the Washington County website, and I thought I saw that they just added, as of Monday, people with disabilities being permitted to get vaccines. Am I wrong about that?
This is Jeffrey. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm new to this format. That would be a great update to hear. We are, I talk so fast and I apologize for that. As we are based in Detroit, we are working, fighting in Washtenaw, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County, and we are on Zooms every day with county commissioners and health departments. So I know Dessa Cosma, my boss, is in communication. We did email Administrator Dill today, but we have not received a response. So if you're able to put in the Q&A, I would love to, click on a link and learn myself. That's how fast things are moving. The ship is being built as it's being sailed. People are being left off, and that's why we're here. And we cannot ask you enough to be our champions.
Well, that's wonderful. Can we send you, Denise, do we have email addresses for these people?
We have the executive director's email address,
Okay,
but I can also reach out to her and ask her to send me the rest.
Okay.
Thank you. Time's up.
Would that help if you got that information?
Yes, you can send it to my boss, Dessa, and
Okay.
Aisha is someone that works with us too and has my email address.
Judah has his hand up. I could be mistaken.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up an email from Washtenaw County Public Health sent out on the 8th. And it says that as of Monday of this week, people age 50 and older with disabilities are eligible. So there's a qualification there of age.
That is what the email said, but then before this meeting, I went to the actual county site, and the first thing on there, it said people with disabilities, and then below it, it said 50. That was new from what I had seen. Again, I could be wrong, but if you got the email a few days ago, it could have changed.
Okay, thanks.
We will get a clarification and let Dessa know. Thank you very, very much for giving us this information. I know, Pam?
Commissioner Dent, yes.
I just pulled up the Washington Health Department for Washington County, and it specifically says updated March 8th at 8:30 a.m. Those 50 years or older with medical conditions or disabilities. So it is both. And
Right.
there's a qualifier that it has to be 50 years.
And did you go to the actual county you're on the Washtenaw County site?
Health Department, Washtenaw County.
I'm sure, okay. Well, I could be wrong.
Well,
I'll
could
find
be
the link.
or.
I'll find the link and look again. I hope I'm right. I'm sorry if I'm wrong.
I assume you would prefer disabilities of any age over 16 or something.
Yes, this is Jeffrey. Absolutely. Yeah, we are looking for 16 to 49. We are asking Washtenaw and all county commissioners across the state to recognize that there will be a need to plan for students with disabilities, 15 and under, too. It's very, very important, as well as caregivers, right, associated with everyone. And yeah, it's very difficult to tell someone in Michigan with Down syndrome who is 16 years old that you are eligible in Utah, but not here.
Thank you very much for coming to us.
Thank you.
We'll get back to you. Thank you. Next, we have a guest. We're very fortunate to have Naomi Goldberg here. She's Ann Arbor's LGBTQ liaison to the mayor, and she wants to discuss, or we want her to discuss, her role with the city. And will later join us to talk about the conversion therapy proposed ordinance we're dealing with. Naomi? Oh, Travis. You would like to introduce her, would you mind?
I am happy to introduce Naomi again. I don't know that I can say more than I've said before in singing her praises. I am incredibly grateful that she's stepped up to take on this role, and I have been privileged to work with her during my time as LGBTQ liaison and as president of the Jim Toy Center. And she really, I think, brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to this role. She's the Director of Policy Research. Is that the right title, Naomi? At the Movement Advancement Project, and specifically does work focused on the challenges facing LGBTQ families. And so I am really excited she has stepped into this. I think she brings a policy perspective and lens to the role that can really help us continue to shape our local policies and ordinances to ensure that we're working to best represent the LGBTQ residents here and make sure that our laws and policies are reflective of their goals as well. So I'm really excited that she's taken this on. And and I also wanted to mention, we have had together already a coffee hour. We're doing some community outreach to try to make sure that LGBTQ residents have access even now during COVID. So she's already kind of stepping into the public engagement sphere as well to make sure that people know that she is available and accessible. And so we're really lucky to have her. And so I'll turn it over to Naomi.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's really great to be here and I appreciate the invitation. As Travis said, my name is Naomi Goldberg. I am a constituent of Travis's. I live in the 3rd Ward. My wife and I moved to Ann Arbor 3.5 years ago, although I had a previous stint in Ann Arbor from 2004 to 2008 when I worked at the U of M hospital and then was in graduate school. As Travis said, I work for the Movement Advancement Project. I've been there for almost 11 years and I am newly the deputy director and LGBTQ program director there. And prior to that, I was at the Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law, which is another LGBTQ think tank. And then I have a master's of public policy from U of M. And I'm really excited about this new role and getting to work with you all and the mayor and the council and really try to help be that connector between the community and all of the great things that are happening, and also be sort of an information sharer back and forth or in multiple directions. So happy to connect folks to what you all are doing, but then also kind of share, what we're hearing from the community. The other hats that I wear that I think are somewhat relevant to this role, I also am on the board at Temple Beth Emeth, and I'm a volunteer organizer with Bend the Arc Ann Arbor, which is a Jewish social action organization. So I'm definitely sitting in a few different circles. As I think both Leslie and Travis said, I'm really excited to think about, the work that you're doing and what we can do to make sure that LGBTQ people in Ann Arbor can access the really amazing protections that this commission is tasked with enforcing and has really lifted up. And I know we're going to talk more later today about the conversion therapy ban. I'm also really eager, given the rapidly shifting landscape, to make sure that LGBTQ people know about the protections that they do have here in Michigan. Just today, I learned that Republicans in the state have introduced a ban on transgender youth playing sports in accordance with their gender identity. Obviously, the schools are not within your purview, but I think it's a really important thing for you all to know about and to sort of keep an eye on what's happening, insofar as it's really sort of a statement about trans kids and their welcomeness in our community at large. And so I think there's just a lot of opportunity for the commission to sort of be public, particularly as we potentially head into a ballot measure in 2022 within our state around non-discrimination. I think what we're seeing and the rhetoric we're seeing will only continue, particularly with trans kids and trans adults being really center. And so the ways in which the commission can help people know that when something bad happens to them, that you all are here, I think is really critical. So that's just an example of sort of the landscape that I'm seeing and the ways that I'm excited to work with you all. I know Leslie and I had a conversation this morning about the conversion therapy ban and some ideas I have around how critical this is, but also what a great public education moment that it provides, and ways in which you all and the city and some of the really amazing organizations we have in Ann Arbor and in our county can really help educate families about this really harmful practice. So harmful that, you know, you all are maybe going to be taking action, and that really that's what we're hoping is, right, that families make decisions out of love that are safe for their kids. So I'll pause there. Certainly happy to answer questions. I can also put my email in the chat so that if you ever want to get a hold of me, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I think we have a chat.
We do have a chat.
You do? I don't see it.
I think.
I don't see it either.
Leslie, if I could just jump in, because this came up at a previous commission meeting that I'm part of, we should not use the chat function because the public cannot see that. So it's not open.
Okay, thank you.
Well, my email is just my last name, which is there, Goldberg, and period, and then my first name, Naomi, @gmail.com. So pretty easy. It's also on the city website.
Yes, in fact, it's on our website as well.
Great.
Other questions? I have a question, and that is, how can we work with you better? What are the things we can help you with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to hear, you know, and to sit in on the meetings as frequently as I can, you know, to understand what constituents are raising, but also the issues that you're tackling. I also think, you know, the more that I can understand how you all function, that's a way for me to just continue to kind of in the community remind people that you all are here and that there is a process for people who are experiencing discrimination to access the protections we have here in our city. So those are a couple of things I'm thinking of, but I'm definitely kind of open door. You know, Travis reached out about doing a coffee hour and I did that and had a great chat with Leslie. So definitely just excited to brainstorm with you all and figure out what makes sense.
One thing that I'm thinking has to do with complaints, and I don't know. We get, you know, we can get complaints for violations of the non-discrimination ordinance, which does cover LGBT community members and probably covers them better than the state or federal laws. And I don't know if complaints are going anywhere else. One of the things we're trying to do is at least be aware of all the complaints so that we can start looking at patterns. So are they going anywhere else, or would you be recommending them to us, or does it they go to Jim Toy Center, for example?
I mean, it's sort of an interesting patchwork. I mean, certainly we have the city protections. We also have the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, which is accepting complaints based on sex discrimination and their understanding of that to include sexual orientation and gender identity. And, you know, the Biden administration, as a result of the Supreme Court ruling last June, is the EEOC is taking employment-based complaints. And we just heard, for example, yesterday that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will be taking complaints around credit discrimination. And so the landscape is shifting so quickly at the federal level. I'm not sure, and it would be interesting to hear from you all the extent to which when complaints come in alleging race discrimination or disability discrimination, to what extent do you coordinate with, the local EEOC accepting office or with the state? Because that might be, if there's already a pathway for sharing information, that might be something that, we could replicate now that there are more robust protections coming through, particularly the federal government. But I think, just more communication about that. And I also think, Travis and I have been talking a lot about like just helping people understand what rights they do have, and that, there's a lot of things that are discriminatory that happen that people just deal with because they've been dealing with it for so long. And I think to take that step, to file a complaint can feel really scary. And so I think the more that we can, across all of the enumerated classes, make sure that people know what you all do, how that works, the protections that exist for them if they do file a complaint, I think we could certainly do more.
We should be doing some collaboration for that. Evidently more. We often do refer to other agencies like EEOC, but especially for LGBT issues, sometimes it's best for us to do it. Linda?
Commissioner Dawes has his hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead then.
Commissioner Dawes?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Naomi, for your presentation. I wanted to ask you if you thought that, this hate bill in the Republican legislature at Michigan regarding trans kids and sports in high schools, if that is a trend that you believe will and should be not only watched, but potentially acted upon in some way, as more and more communities may step up and ban trans athletes in high school from participation. I wonder to what extent you feel that that has steam behind it, and whether those are more and more communities are going to start implementing those bans, or even on the state level implementing those bans, and whether or not you know of any actions to push back against that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, for the most part, rules, regulations regulating participation in high school and even middle school sports are governed by state athletic associations. So here in Michigan, right, there's a state interscholastic athletic association that governs how trans athletes can participate. In some states, they don't have a policy. I actually need to look and see in Michigan what exactly our policy is. But part of what lawmakers are doing at the state level in multiple states, and the Mississippi governor is expected to sign a bill literally today or tomorrow. Last year, the governor in Idaho signed a bill. These bills take away the authority of the state regulators to enforce those, and basically say, well, you will lose school funding potentially if you allow trans participation in sports. There is potentially federal legislation. There's actually an amendment proposed on Saturday as part of the COVID relief bill proposed by Republicans that narrowly failed by a vote of 49 to 50, which is a little scary, that would have withheld federal funding from both elementary, high school, and colleges that permitted trans athletes. This is definitely a playbook. There's sample legislation, model legislation that's been circulated by anti-LGBTQ opponents. So yes, I mean, this is a trend that is very concerning. I think it's a really nuanced issue, and it takes a lot to introduce who are trans kids and what their experiences are. Most people haven't met a transgender child and don't really understand, and they're playing on that lack of information and the fear that I think comes along with it. So this is definitely, I feel like we in many ways are in a 2004 moment, which here in Michigan, we had a ballot measure against marriage and banning civil unions and domestic partnerships here. I really feel like we are in that moment in many ways, with state legislatures passing these kind of bills and putting them forward. And so we are working as a movement to figure out, how do we counter these? I think public education, long game public education about the experiences of transgender youth is critical. But it's going to be painful, I think, for the next, particularly for the state legislative session. The opportunity for you all, I think, is more around sort of statements about support and inclusion of trans kids and what our values are as a community, rather than, I don't think there's a particular opportunity for you to recommend something to the council, in part because this is a school issue in our public schools, and then how they interact with the state athletic associations. So I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but it may give you a little more of the context as to what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. And even though it's a school, the council may want to make some statement about it. We could also make a statement about it if it looks like this is really a threatening.
Yeah, the bill here in Michigan was just introduced today. You know, obviously, my anticipation would be that the governor would not sign that kind of bill. But certainly, I think if it picks up steam, you know, it may be at some point, if there's a key vote, it might be a good opportunity. I'm happy to stay in touch about how that's going, depending on how you all feel. I also know, you know, you all are independent entities, and I know the recent public school city council engagement, you know, highlights the extent to which you each have your own authority, and I don't want to encourage you to overstep that if it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions for Naomi? Thank you very much. And please stick around. We'll be back with you. Okay. City Council has evidently recognized the need for a serious consideration of the role of facial recognition in policing in Ann Arbor. And Travis Redina, as a City Council member, and Liaison have taken it upon themselves to help with that. Travis, you want to talk about that initiative?
I'm happy to, but I think you may have missed an agenda item. I don't want to jump ahead of Aisha.
Oh, you're right, I have. Well, I don't.
Go ahead.
Since I've introduced it, what if we go ahead? Then
All right.
All done.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the time. Yes, as you mentioned, and actually, I think this is something that several of us, Councilmember Nelson also has expressed interest in this as well from our discussions at council. And so one of the pieces that we wanted to explore was the potential for a facial recognition technology ban here in Ann Arbor. And so one of the pieces that we thought was really important was bringing together both HRC and ICPOC in that conversation. And so we're hoping to develop a subcommittee with 2 individuals from both commissions. As you saw from my email, we have our newest commissioner, Aiden and Dilip, have both stepped forward and offered themselves. So ultimately, I hope that we can approve both of them to the subcommittee and get them to work with the individuals that ICPOC is nominating. And I actually don't have their names in front of me right now, but they have also selected 2 folks. And then ultimately, there are, I guess, a couple of things. I know that there is actually already a group, a coalition of local community groups that have come together to form Ban the Scan A2. And they have a website now, banthescana2.com. And I know that they want to involve they want to engage with the subcommittee and potentially work with them on a town hall to discuss the issue. The National ACLU is also interested in being involved and has model legislation that we can work from. But there's some work that needs to be done because there are state laws that vary obviously from state to state that impact what we can actually implement here locally. And so what we're actually asking is for the subcommittee to essentially explore those things, engage with the community around what pieces of this are important to them, and come back to us with some recommendations for a potential ordinance to move forward. Yeah, so I don't know, I don't believe that I, as a non-voting member, can formally request that the 2 of them be nominated, but it would certainly be my desire to have the commission nominate both of them, having expressed interest.
So you think
I move that the Dilip and Aiden be nominated for those for that committee.
A
I
second.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Did you say both Aiden and Dilip?
Yes.
Thank you. You are hereby nominated. Please keep us informed. This is an important human rights issue, and let us know if we can help you. Now, there's also been a rise, an alarming rise of hate activity against Asian Americans, and Aisha is going to talk about that. Aisha?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. So there have been, just an alarming kind of rise of anti-Asian American sentiment since the start of the coronavirus, and it really heightened over the Lunar New Year. So the state is still collecting data, but we do see a lot of reports, but we know that there's more incidents happening than people are reporting. People just, they're afraid to come forward. They don't know where to go. So, as I serve as the chair of the Michigan Asian State Commission, the Asian American Affairs Commission, we're going to release, we're working with different policymakers at various levels. So State Senator Stephanie Chang is going to release a resolution condemning hate. And then Washtenaw County Commissioner Justin Hodge was there, and he said, I want to introduce some sort of resolution at the Washtenaw County level. And I think it would be an opportunity for us to potentially collaborate with Justin Hodge, or do something where we also support that resolution, and we say that we condemn hate from happening in our communities. We're committed to, educating, preventing it, whatever it may be. So that's one update on what's happening, is that we're trying to release these resolutions at multiple levels. And I'm hoping that HRC can be a part of that. Are there any questions about it? Okay. So County Commissioner Hodge is working on a resolution with Stephanie Chang, and I've asked him to share it with us once it's ready. And I will bring it to us, and we can look it over.
Okay. It's certainly something we can do.
Yeah.
And we can do other things as well. I think I would be surprised if we wouldn't want to all contribute to this in some way.
Yeah, I want to mention, Leslie was at our last commission meeting, and we really appreciated that. I know the commissioners really appreciated that. We are commissioners that represent districts from all over Michigan. We're all appointed by the governor. A lot of them have really strong connections to the community. And Leslie came and said, I'm here representing HRC, and I want you all to know that we stand in solidarity with you. We stand against all hate. We'll do whatever it takes. And the commissioners were very responsive to that, and they reached out afterwards. So I want to thank you, Leslie, for doing that. And I think it also is a way for us to build that community relationship and let people know that we're here, right? Dilip, do you have something that you want to add?
Thanks, Aisha. I strongly support, some kind of collaboration. And I think that, the city of Ann Arbor has to take some leadership here, because we have one of the highest percentages of Asian populations in the state, in Ann Arbor itself. So I think some leadership on our part is due in support of this. But I also wanted to ask, in your awareness at the state level, if you know of any activity in other communities where they've taken some leadership already or not.
Well, I know Macomb County wants to be involved, and they're working on a resolution. The city of Clawson is doing something, but actually, I'm really glad that you brought up that we have a high proportion of Asian Americans, because people were asking about Ann Arbor and other areas. And that's when I decided to invite Leslie to the meeting, so that she could kind of talk to, we're here, and we're here to do something. So I think all these communities are trying to work. We're trying to make sure that it's not so disjointed. So we're trying to do something more coordinated, where we release all these resolutions at multiple levels. But I think you're absolutely right that Ann Arbor has kind of a responsibility here to definitely be a part of this.
We have about 14% of our population self-identifies as Asian.
Yep.
one of the things that we do that very few other communities have the ability to do is we collect complaint data. We collect information about complaints based on race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, everything, anything that's covered by the non-discrimination ordinance. And having that allows us to help our citizens. First of all, we have a flyer that describes how to fill out a complaint to the commission. And one of the problems is for this, especially Asian American discrimination and harassment, is that they do tend to underreport. I wonder if posting more flyers will help and educating people about their ability to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that flyers are a good idea, Barry, but also, you know, everything's virtual right now. I think that if we can think about how do we educate people virtually, it might be a better idea. So for example, like I'm working with the Attorney General's hate crimes unit over this, over helping them collect the data. And they've asked before, they said, if the city of Ann Arbor wants to do a town hall, we can help organize it. We can come and speak and we can talk about this is how you report, right? And we aren't just collecting data about hate against Asian Americans. It's happening to other racial groups too. This is how you speak out. This is how you de-escalate. So if I don't know if we've done that in the past as a commission, but if we're interested, I think that would be another good way to actually do something in the community that kind of connects the community members to these bodies that can help them and protect them. Yeah.
Are there people in commission who'd be interested in this?
I would.
Might be something to explore.
I would.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've got Aiden, we've got Judah.
Keita?
Okay.
So I will follow up. I'll follow up on that at the next commission meeting, and I'll also reach out to the Attorney General's office, and I will start bringing information to you guys about organizing it. So I wanted to, I know I'm wearing kind of several hats right now. I wanted to jump back to Disability Power being on with us. You know, as I mentioned, I also work for them, and I just want to kind of uplift what they mentioned. I did receive some clarification from DESA. The state did change rules. It was statewide that if you had a disability over the age of 50, so that was a qualifier, age was a qualifier, then you could receive a vaccination, which is really unfortunate considering there's been an onslaught of data that's come out about people, especially with intellectual and developmental disabilities, are like 10 times more likely to die if they get COVID. And many of those people are, you know, adult dependents living with their parents who have other at-risk populations. I just think that we can't qualify it with an age. We just know that people with disabilities in general are more susceptible and vulnerable than all of us. So our ask is that we try to push for people over the age of 16 with a disability period getting vaccinated. And we have gone to Washington County Health Department. We've given presentations, we've given them information, and what they want us to do, what we want to do is any connections that we may have here, you know, there's city council members with us here, with the health department, any influence that we have, that we also try to elevate this issue in any capacity that we can.
So we don't know for sure. Is that true that whether they are covered already now? No.
I mean, everybody else seems to think that I'm wrong about that. I maybe I dreamt it, but I mean, I
wish you were right. I mean, I wish you were right.
I'll look again later. But here's my question. What was the reply from the county health department? I mean, presumably they're going according to whatever they view the science is. So
right.
What was their response?
It was them saying that, like, you know, if we prioritize people with disabilities, kind of wondering, are you trying to ask us to deprioritize other people? And we're saying, no, we think that, like, you know, we're just as vulnerable. People with disabilities are vulnerable. So are other people. And then them also just kind of copying on and saying, we don't really have control. We don't have supply. That's the issue. So we understand that there's a lot that's not in their control, but there's a lot that is. We're saying with the supply that you have, like, please prioritize people who have disabilities, not just a few segments of the population, or you're overlooking this huge vulnerable group. Travis, do you want to add something?
Elizabeth was before me. I'm going to let her speak.
Oh. Elizabeth?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to add that I've had some communications with the county on this specific topic on behalf of a constituent, and it's just very challenging. I mean, I think that, so I don't know who else on this call has a similar experience, but I actually qualified under the county standards like a month ago or 6 weeks ago or something. And, you know, just because somebody is in the qualifying category, it doesn't, you know, it's very, very challenging. Like I was surprised. I think about the category of a disabled person, and I figure out, or I wonder how the county tracks them down in order to let them know that they are eligible, or has them sign up and prioritizes them. It's very difficult. Like I work for a school that is a childcare provider, and we were in like 1B, and it took a personal email from me to Helena Lovelock, and this was just like in the last week, to be like we've really been trying, we've signed up everywhere, and it turned out that they were tracking us was through a networking system that wasn't as complete as it could have been. Like they should have been going through licensing with the state, and they weren't. Like I just think that there are so many balls they have in the air that they're juggling. Like I'm sympathetic to the challenges that they're having, and like the idea of what does prioritizing even mean? It's so challenging. So that was not a particularly enlightening comment, except to say that I do understand that they're really struggling, I think, to distribute these vaccines.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, and I mean I sympathize with that, but also they're being purposeful about who can get it and who can't. Really, people with disabilities, they already have there's just so many disparities in health outcomes. Most people with disabilities are people of color, and they're just compounded with everything that they are experiencing. And we're seeing it in the outcomes. We're seeing people dying, and it could potentially be preventable. But I mean, I understand this is also, you know, this is an organizational issue. This is also about like just getting it to people and how the systems that are being created to get it to people.
Yeah, just my anecdotal experience is similar to Elizabeth. You know, I'm qualified, but have yet to hear from university or from the county. And I worked for the county for 33 years, and I'm theoretically have been eligible for quite some time, but I think it's a supply issue right now. And I support what you're saying, Aisha, and the other speakers, but right now they don't seem to have the supply even for the limited categories that they deem eligible.
Yeah, I think just basically that, you know, limited supply that they have, it goes to the most vulnerable. I'm sorry, my dog is trying to attack his way into the room. He just did. So
Councilmember Redina has his hand up.
Yeah, and my question is related, I guess, maybe to the extent as more and more of the supply does appear to be getting distributed to pharmacies and, you know, the Rite Aids and the Myers and things like that, to what extent might this also require some level of, you know, state prioritization in their guidelines? And are conversations being had at the state level as well? Are folks equally engaging with state legislators and the governor's staff and things like that, to see if they can get some sort of, you know, statewide prioritization as more vaccines become available at some of these private pharmacies?
Yeah, and that is something that we're also working at. But the problem is that this is so much kind of based on localities can do their own thing, that's the pushback that we keep getting. That like, we can't, this city does it differently, this city doesn't. That's why Detroit was able, they looked at the data and, you know, Mayor Duggan said, yeah, you're right, let's do it. And they're one of the first, or the only in Michigan right now. But otherwise, the state has just been telling us like everyone is different, and we can't really dictate it. So that has been a little bit frustrating. But to that point, Governor Whitmer has come out, and during this entire pandemic, There have just been various incidences, just kind of showcasing, putting a light on how ableist institutions are and how they think of people with disabilities. So there was a health system that had released some guidelines about rationing care, and they had said something about, people with disabilities, which is illegal. And Governor Whitmer, when we went to her, immediately released an executive order saying that you can't do that. But so there is some help at the state level, but pretty much we're being told that we have to go locality by locality. So
it almost sounds hopeless. And
I mean, Detroit made a change. Yeah. Detroit made a change. So I think Travis is right. As more supply becomes available, just, being an advocate for, can it please go to the most vulnerable among us?
I had a question. I wonder if that group had been asked, who spoke previously, had been asked to speak at the Disability Commission.
Yes, they had.
Okay,
They
and then
did,
secondly, I wondered if it would be useful to speak to some commissioners on the Disability Commission, particularly with regard to the overlap between what their goals and objectives are and where that overlaps with human rights.
I think that's a great idea, because this is a human rights issue. And if there's one aspect that we can bring to this, it's like really trying to remind people that, like, let's make sure that human rights are being upheld in all of this. So yeah, if we could work with the Disability Commission and find out, like, what can we do and what's going on, I think that's a great idea. Elizabeth?
I happen to be the council liaison to the Commission on Disabilities Issues, and I know that this topic has come up. I'm not sure that we technically passed a resolution about it, but we talked about it probably, well, I mean, a year ago, probably, when there was discussion around, like, decisions around treatment and if hospitals were at capacity and rationing care, and how frightening that was relative to the population of people with disabilities. Like, this has been a thread throughout the pandemic. Any situation where we're rationing anything, basically. If you would like me to, I can actually, if we identify people within this commission who are interested in this issue or collaborating with a subset of the Disability Commission, I can make that connection. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I'm interested in the crossover. Yeah.
And I
would be too. Yeah, that would be great.
I'd be interested also. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just texting Modessa now, and she also has some information. I think it would be a really good idea if we did meet with the Disability Commission. But from Dessa, Dessa's on, like, the COVID, governor appointed task force, and she's saying that the state can prioritize if they want to, and some states have, and they've chosen not to. So, in any power or influence that we have, if we can push this issue, I mean, I think it would save lives.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Okay, all right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Minutes for our February meeting. I think we start with a motion to pass the minutes. We second it, and then we talk about it. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the February minutes.
Second?
Second.
Philip? Discussion. Are there any changes that you think should be made to the minutes? No discussion? Then we take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay, none. Fine, minutes passed. Old business. Fair chance access to housing. I have some good news about that and some bad news. The good news is that it did come before council on March 1st, and it was approved. Not only was it approved unanimously and enthusiastically, which I think is very, very good. And unfortunately, we are going to have to make some changes in it. So we're going to probably have to withdraw it and resubmit it. There's been a legal challenge, and it surprised everybody who was involved because we did a lot of homework, as you can imagine. And there's a fix that needs to be made, a change, because it does, surprisingly, it does contradict a law. So we're going to have to make it a little bit more complicated to do. Linda, you want to explain that better than I can?
Well, it's not that we have to necessarily go into the details, but it's not that it, as I understand it, Margie said, it doesn't actually have to be resubmitted, that on Monday, there will be a move to make some changes for it, and they'll have to do, that will then constitute the first reading again.
Yeah.
I think, as I understand it, and then the second reading would be 2 weeks later. So it will look different when you see it on Monday. Margie is making the change now.
Travis?
Yeah, I'm going to actually also look at Councilmember Nelson, and to the extent I don't know exactly what needs to be changed, but we do have second reading on Monday, so it hasn't formally passed yet. It passed through first reading.
Right.
To the extent, I mean, could we, to the extent that we could just amend it on Monday, does that not?
We tried that.
Yeah, it's a little too complicated for that. So Stephen Postuma suggested that Margie's going to draft the new language. We're going to look at it, then we'll send it to you guys. And then it will be, I don't know if it's considered an amendment, or I think it will just be, I mean, if it were amended, do things get amended on the second reading typically and then passed? Is that how it?
My understanding was it was going to have to go through a first reading again.
Right, and we were told that the second reading will be converted into another first reading because of the change they're making.
Oh.
And then the second reading will be 2 weeks later. Does that make sense to you?
Procedurally, I'm not sure exactly how it will happen. I mean, I feel like I've been a part of things where we actually, just as a formality, go through the second reading, like vote it down and then like start again. Possibly every once in a while we do something goofy like that, where it feels like we're kind of doing the opposite of what we want to do. But yeah, we can't amend it on the second reading. The whole point of the first and second reading, I think that if it's a change that's like fixing a typo or something, it doesn't count as a substantive change. But like, yes, we're going to be starting over again if it's yeah.
Judah?
Could someone just give us like a clue as to the nature of the conflict?
I can if you want.
I appreciate it. You know.
So we were under the impression that when somebody qualifies, when somebody has to go through the qualification process to get a voucher, Jennifer Hall does the screening. And so Jennifer and Margie both thought that once those vouchers were issued and, the criminal background check gets done at that point, and we've excluded that from the prohibition in the ordinance, that would be it. Well, it turns out that there are 2 other provisions in federal law that actually require landlords who are accepting those vouchers to do the same background checks all over again, even though it's already been done. So that opens up a giant loophole, because what it means effectively is that landlords can do background checks on every applicant. So because you don't know if somebody's going to be using a voucher necessarily, right, when they apply for your housing. So it gives them, so Margie and Jennifer and Leslie and I, and with some discussion with Keita, I think we figured out a way to sort of carve out another exception that will allow these landlords to do the background checks that's required under federal law. But then they would, would be very conditional. They'd have to make a conditional offer first to the person. Then they do the background checks. Then if the criminal background check turn up the 3 reasons, and there are only 3 reasons that in the federal law that the landlord can deny housing, then that person has an opportunity to say whether it's not true or whether the information is, is somehow wrong. And then, and then if it's right, then okay, the person wouldn't get housing. But theoretically, that should never happen because it's already been done. The screening has already been done. But what we want to avoid is landlords doing a criminal background check, getting information that they're technically not supposed to use, but we're worried then that it's going to bias their opinion about a person, and we're back to where we started, and they'll give the apartment to someone else. So we need to sort of constrain how they're able to do it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, but I'm concerned that is there anything left of the
right? Well, we're trying to
salvage something. Yeah.
Actually, what we're trying to prevent is only the denying of rentals to people who have 3 kinds of legal problems, and they're very rare.
And only those in federal housing.
That's right, and only some
federally subsidized housing. Yeah.
Right.
So it's trying to get around, trying to figure out how to do that.
I mean, Jennifer wasn't aware of it. Margie wasn't aware of it, but McKinley was aware of it and let us know.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
So you will hear more about it, but it's on hold for right this minute. Any other questions about fair housing, fair access to housing? Then we will go on to the next ordinance that we've got pending, and that is one that prohibits the practice by licensed providers of conversion therapy to minors. And you have copies of that ordinance. Let's begin with the proposed ordinance itself. Did everybody have a chance to read it? Any questions or comments about this? It's an ordinance that is now going to be called, we're proposing, fair, not the right one. Ordinance to protect youth by prohibiting the practice of conversion therapy in the city of Ann Arbor. People had a chance to read it. Do you have any changes? This is not the first time anybody, I think, has seen it. We said at one point that we were going to try to get this ordinance to cover conversion therapy that occurred online or that happened elsewhere to Ann Arbor residents. We were not able to get that done. It doesn't look like it's possible legally. So we are going to go on. So this is just conversion therapy that takes place in the city of Ann Arbor.
I have a question.
Yes.
We'll see. So hypothetically, someone based within Ann Arbor, it would be someone who's receiving it or providing it from the city, right? Because, like, for example, if I'm a practitioner and I give telehealth services, I provide conversion therapy, which I never would, but let's hypothetically say, online, would I be subject to this? And my
at this point, the person who would be penalized, or who would be violating the law, the ordinance,
right,
would be the therapist, the licensed provider.
Okay.
So No, if they were done online, they would not.
So if I did it online, it wouldn't be covered. Oh,
Not unless the person was online also, or was an Ann Arbor provider online. And that is a limitation, but it is difficult to prosecute somebody over whom you have no jurisdiction.
I got confused. I might be the only one. Okay, so if someone is giving it in person and they're practicing in Ann Arbor,
yes,
they would be subject to this law. They'd be punished. If someone is providing it online to a client based out of Ann Arbor or inside Ann Arbor,
I see what you're asking.
And I'm the provider. I'm sitting at my computer in Ann Arbor and I'm providing it to someone in, I don't know, Flint, or I'm providing it to someone in Ann Arbor. Would I only be held responsible for providing it to someone in Ann Arbor?
It's a good question. I think right now, the way it's stated, it would be, but I don't think it has to be. Linda?
This is a question that's come up. It's my understanding that the legal justification for this comes from the police power of the state to protect the health and welfare of its minors. So to the extent that the city is protecting the health and welfare of the minors of Ann Arbor, I think that may be the limitation.
Okay.
But that's just a guess.
I was wondering that.
Yeah.
And it would be difficult to provide it to prevent.
And keep in mind, we used several other cities in the state of Michigan, and other states have similar conversion therapy ordinances. We use those as our models.
Yes.
So.
I mean, Aisha brings up a good point because, during the pandemic, telehealth has exploded.
Yeah.
And so has teletherapy. And so, the online therapy is where it's at. And how do you police that, so to speak?
Right.
Because anybody within Ann Arbor could log on to a Zoom from a conversion therapist in Dallas, Texas, or, Grand Rapids or whatever. And there's nothing we could do about that. And so that's kind of a difficulty just because, there's been a mass shift to online therapy.
Right.
Is there, I'm not a lawyer, so is there anything about like the use, I don't know how to phrase this. Is there anything about people who are practicing, whatever, clinicians within Ann Arbor not using their licensing to do harm? Is there like a law like that exists? Does that make any sense? That like, could we fall back on saying that anyone who's a licensed provider, who's a resident of Ann Arbor, cannot give conversion therapy, whether it be online or in person? Because I know, Linda, you were talking about it's about protecting the youth. Is there something that applies to like having a license and living here and not using it to like brainwash people? And
no, that might be more a question of licensing provisions.
Yeah. Yes. And it is against most professional social work, psychology, psychiatry, counseling, frowns very strongly.
True.
But we get into freedom of speech issues. And I think we'd have a harder time passing it and a harder time enforcing it.
Okay.
Judah?
The ordinance looks good to me. I mean, other than we can't affect these online things that we would like to, but I actually have a question for Naomi. Have you seen any instances, have you had complaints about this happening in Ann Arbor?
I have not, and I know Travis and I have talked about this, and we have not heard of anything happening in Ann Arbor.
So just
Travis, I think you wanted to chime in there.
The mere prospect of this ordinance has scared everyone off of it, so that's good.
Well, and I would just add, I think part of why I think an ordinance like this is so important is because I think it's actually more about educating parents.
Right.
Most conversion therapy that happens often comes through a parent whose child comes out as gay or trans or whatever, and they're afraid and they sort of start looking for resources and trying to figure out what to do. And it actually comes from a place mostly of care and concern, and it's directed in a place that's not safe. And so I think, it's really more for me when I think about an ordinance like this in a place like Ann Arbor that doesn't permit this and doesn't have it happening that we know of, is really that kind of education moment, and what public education comes when this does get passed, hopefully by the city, and how the city talks about it and how community organizations then know that this is part of what is allowed here or what isn't allowed here. So I think it's a really important piece. Travis, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I was gonna add one that during my time as LGBTQ liaison, this was also not something that came up as a local provider. I think obviously one of the concerns I have, and one of the pieces that I was hoping we would be able to pull together, was if Ann Arbor youth were subjected to conversion therapy out of our borders, and how we might be able to regulate that and prohibit that as well. I don't know. I also don't know if it would be valuable. I have another question. I spoke with two members of two local transgender residents this week who asked me about this ordinance, this proposed ordinance specifically, and asked about this. I know that the current scope is focused on licensed providers. They asked about defining conversion therapy essentially more broadly to include essentially abusive parents and guardians who prevent children from transitioning, and whether or not that could be considered conversion therapy. So I know that there are questions that are coming from the community as well, and I don't know. So obviously I have access to Attorney Radabaugh and can reach out to her and ask some questions, but to the extent that other commissioners are asking questions as well that are kind of shaped in kind of some of the legal possibilities that we might have in developing this, I wonder if it might be beneficial to ask her to join us at a commission meeting, so that we can get some, because it sounds like, I think one of the questions we already heard, we don't really know the answer to that. And of course, those of you who are working on it can take those back to her, but I wonder if it might be valuable for the commission to hear from her directly as well.
I'm surprised she's not here. I hope she has a link, because she was intending to come. I don't know.
Can I make one more comment about the question about whether therapists in another place doing therapy online or even in person, really, with somebody in town? There was a suggestion that some language could be created, but the lawyer in the office who was going to work on that, then when push came to shove, didn't or couldn't come up with anything. So, we wanted to present it tonight, but I guess we can't say for a certainty that we know the answer to whether it would be okay to somehow expand the ordinance to cover that. So I think also if that question came from Travis directly to, Elizabeth again, and say, and we've been, I'm sorry, to Margie again, it might be helpful. But we've gone around and around, and Margie was the one who first suggested expanding it because she spoke to this other lawyer in her office. And then when we spoke to the other lawyer in the office, he didn't seem to have ideas, at least by tonight.
Right.
Maybe he still will.
But he knew that he promised to have it by tonight if he could do it. And he did not think he could do it when we finally talked about it.
But it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Right. Doesn't mean.
Right.
And I can certainly reach out to her with questions directly as well. Okay. And so I don't know to the extent if it's helpful, and if I'm submitting some questions to her anyway, if other commissioners have questions that they would like me to ask, if you want to email them to me, I'm happy to include them and send them along.
Thanks.
I suspect that there are a number of other things that we could cover, but I don't think we should be covering it in this particular ordinance. I think we should build on it if necessary. But this will give us a start. There are many ordinances around the country, and there are some also in Michigan. But an ordinance in Florida is now being challenged, and I think on freedom of speech basis. I don't think we can, so we've got to be careful to get this one through first, I think is where we are. Do you actually want to hold on to this ordinance and not pass it on at this point, or are you waiting to hear more before we actually act on it? Any thoughts?
I mean, I think given what you just shared, maybe we should just try to move this forward, right? But I don't want to speak for everyone. I mean, do we feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions here? Because I know we've been working on this for a while. And Leslie,
yeah.
I think what we're talking about though really boils down to jurisdiction.
Yeah,
that's what my law brain says to me. And so, you know, with the whole telehealth thing, I agree with Dellup. You know, it is the new wave. It's the wave of the future in terms of medicine. I think we've seen this huge change. But regardless, we don't have any jurisdiction over somebody who lives in California. So we can wish and hope and pray all day long, and we could write it into an ordinance, but it doesn't do us any good if it's not enforceable. So, so for that piece of it, I don't think there is a whole lot more to discuss, because I think it really does boil down to jurisdiction. Now, what Travis is talking about is definition. And actually, Travis, when you were talking, I was, you know, obviously I'm horrified to think that would happen to some young person. But the other piece of it is that I think about abuse. I think of child abuse. And again, not really fitting into therapy, conversion therapy, because what we're talking about in this particular ordinance is prohibiting people who are licensed. And when we start moving from that sphere, I'm afraid, not that it's not needed, that's not what I'm saying, but I fear that then we start to get into the weeds again about parental rights and how you can raise your kids. And again, I'm not sure that this, I guess I agree kind of with what Leslie said. And that is, I'm not sure that this is the place for that. There may be something different we can do. But right now, I just feel like what we've done and we've tweaked, I think we've tweaked it about as much as we can.
This one has been under consideration a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would like to see it have some life and be considered now.
The other thing is that once this is in place, other things can be based on it. For example, you could conceivably write letters to practitioners elsewhere, and maybe to the professional associations that license them, and say in Ann Arbor, this is illegal. We can't do anything, but we want you to know that so and so is practicing this to Ann Arbor people, and we will try to discourage it in any way we can. I don't know how much weight that holds, but once we establish its illegality, I think we have some leverage to do other things.
And Leslie, I think to your point, it provides an opportunity that, say, a youth in Ann Arbor were experiencing this, they knew that it was prohibited, they called the police. Maybe that is an opportunity for police education to say, you know, we can't actually do something here, but let's put you over to the Human Rights Commission, who might be able to help you explore, is it prohibited in the state that practitioner lives in? Is it prohibited in that city? Or are there other resources that we can help connect you to? That I think I think to reiterate what you're saying is it provides a starting place for us then to leap off for services for youth, since our goal really is about protecting the youth in our community.
Yeah, and now I was not here for the creation of this resolution, so I can understand how much work went into this. However, I do think that having read this with fresh eyes, I would voice support of it moving forward to City Council, particularly because I do think that this is relatively needed and time sensitive as well, as we have, again, the explosion of telehealth appointments and with our practitioners as well. So personally, it looks great to me, having again seen it with fresh eyes, and I would like to voice my support of moving it forward.
That's important. Thank you, Aiden. Any other thoughts about this? Linda?
I agree. I think we should go forward with it, but there is that lingering question in my mind about whether it can be more expansive now that Margaret and this other lawyer raised it. So I guess I'd like to see us vote to approve it, but also send the question to Margaret. And if it turns out within the next week or two that yes, there is some legal basis for expanding it to practitioners outside of Ann Arbor, then we, so like I could move that we approve it on the assumption that we can't expand the jurisdiction. If it turns out within the next week or two that we can, then we revisit it. That would be my proposal. If you don't like that, I'm fine with just going ahead as it.
We can also, I mean, to the extent that we've discovered that within the next week or so before this hits the agenda for first reading, that there is an expansion that can be made, and Elizabeth and I can also propose an amendment at the council table as well.
Okay, good. And I think Margaret is planning to hold it for at least 2 weeks. So there'll be time for that. Are we ready for a vote? Somebody want to make a motion to approve this proposed ordinance?
That the ordinance as drafted be approved to be sent along to City Council.
I second. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No one. Thank you. Let's look at the resolution that supports this. This was created by Keita and Diana. Do either one of you want to say anything in explanation of this resolution?
I did a lot of cutting and pasting.
She did.
And I've never done one before, so please give me feedback. Like if you think it needs to be changed. Keita went in and made some changes too, but I am open to feedback, even though it was my first time.
Feedback, Judah?
I was just gonna say, what's with all the whereas stuff? I'm just joking.
Any other comments or questions about this? Linda?
Just wanted to point out that I hope it's okay that we changed the name of it, and the last paragraph is changed just slightly to incorporate the name, because I think it said something like resolution to ban conversion therapy. So we added youth to the title just to clarify.
Why don't we, that would be cleaner. Can we do that?
It's already been changed, I think, in the copy.
It says resolution to ban the use of conversion therapy on minors.
Yes.
It's not what we call the.
No, what I'm saying is the draft that Keita and Diana wrote had a slightly different title, and it's been changed since they saw it. I just want to make sure it's okay.
Okay. Diana and Keita, are you happy with this?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. But should it have on the title of this the name of what we plan to call the ordinance?
Yes. So that the resolution has the same name. Yes.
I would think so.
Well, actually, I think that's not the same name as there's a portion of the ordinance that says the title is, it's not that.
No, but there's a portion that says the new title is, it's not that?
It's not that. That's just a description of the ordinance. It's not the actual title of the ordinance.
But here's something that says that the chapter shall be known as the ordinance to protect youth by prohibiting the practice of conversion therapy.
Yeah, that's not what the title of the resolution says. It's a mouthful, so.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be, is what you're saying. I was just wondering if it should be because it.
You know, if you want to rewrite it, go for it.
I don't know. It just seems like it should be the same thing to me.
I also think it should be the same thing.
Agreed. Just do a little cut and paste in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
And then you'd also need to change it in the last paragraph. Same thing, I think.
Here, the last paragraph, the last statement just says to adopt the ordinance banning the use of. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't say what the name is.
right, so we should put it in.
We could put it in. Okay. Okay. If we do, is anybody have any objection for that to that change? Somebody want to make a motion to adopt this resolution?
Motion to adopt the resolution prohibiting the practice of conversion therapy on youth.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Excellent. Ordinance is passed, or the passed here. We'll send it to City Council, but there may be an amendment, and you will be informed if that's the case. And I assume we'll be asked to pass it as well. Okay. Now we are at a time to talk about housing practices. Our last topic on the agenda, and this is Elizabeth Nelson. So Elizabeth, you want to explain what the issue is and what you want to do about it?
Sure. So I didn't actually recognize this as an HRC issue until a city attorney pointed it out. So graduate students reached out to me, I don't know, 6 weeks ago maybe, and brought up the fact that the housing market in Arbor is particularly around campus for students is so hot that they're pressured to renew leases just like a couple months in. And I have known about this. I didn't ever experience it. Wasn't an undergrad at U of M, and I didn't ever rent in this area. At any rate, like I did not realize that we actually have an ordinance on the books. This is not just a market problem. Like we actually have taken a stab at regulating this. There is 70 days is the limitation. So it's known that for the first 70 days you're in an apartment, your landlord can't start showing it to new people for the next year or start saying, hey, you're going to renew for next year. 70 days, like that's just a little over 2 months. And so it's really almost nothing. And so I was hearing anecdotes about just how awful this is, having to commit to a contract so many months in advance. That your plans change and you have very unappealing options of either subletting and being at risk because, the people that you choose to take over your lease, if they are unable to pay, I mean, just bad things can happen, or at the mercy of your landlord in getting permission to transfer a lease if it ends up that that's not something you can commit to. And this pandemic is sort of highlighted in a lot, like it has in so many situations. This pandemic is sort of highlighted and underlined these situations where people are vulnerable. So I heard the horror story that I heard was somebody, a grad student, they committed to this lease, almost 10 months in advance, and their plans changed and they ended up having to sublet, and they sublet to people who were they weren't students or people who had otherwise had a safety net. They were just sort of working people who the pandemic caused them to lose their jobs. And then all of a sudden this grad student is having to help them navigate the eviction moratorium, and because it's technically their lease. And at any rate, so like I've been working on this with the city attorney's office and staff who enforce things like this. Apparently there's been almost no enforcement of the 70 days. And the speculation there is that it's such a low bar that like the landlords are, it's almost meaningless. So city staff tells me, well, we're going to have a little bit more serious enforcement if we're setting a number higher, that landlords are more likely to cheat or want to violate it. The city attorney's office is telling me that we can't just set any old number we want, because, if we say that you can't start showing an apartment or asking about renewing a lease until like the day before the lease were to end, clearly we're interfering too much in their ability to enter into contracts. But so the graduate students have asked me, their goal is 240 days, which on a standard school, like typical, I guess, campus kind of lease, that would hit like May 1st. And yeah, it was so when this was bounced around the legal department, it was pointed out to me that this might be an HRC issue, because we really are, the people who are most likely to be harmed by this are vulnerable. And it puts people at a huge disadvantage if you're asked to be like putting out these deposits so far in advance. And yeah, I mean, you're like extending yourself and making these commitments, and it's a bad situation that I was really glad to learn about, and also very excited to think about how we were going to fix this and address it.
So it's not only 70 days, 2 months after you rented the place, pretty much, but yeah, it's also hard to get out of.
Well, I mean, like anything, like you sign a contract and you're committed, you've signed up, and you like, you're saying that, 10 months from now, I'm going to be on the hook to pay you 12 months of rent. I'm your tenant. And so your plans change, and you can sublet, but then your name is still on the contract of that lease. You're still on the hook. Or you can beg your landlord to let you transfer the lease, and they may or may not agree to that.
But a lot of contracts say can be canceled 60 days before the date of.
That's not how, no.
The leases don't say that at all.
That's the problem.
And there's that, and there's also you have to put down money, like a damage deposit, etc., for your second year.
Yes. Yeah. It's crazy. I could see that Aiden knows exactly what I'm talking about. Like it blew my mind that this was not just a function of the market, that it was something that we actually have something on the books, but it's just not helpful enough. Like not even close. Like how is 70 days? How does that help any like that? Yeah. So
yeah.
Is there any information on, I'm sorry, Aiden, and maybe Aiden, is there any information on how difficult it is to get an apartment? Is it like really hard to find an apartment in Ann Arbor? I know that I've heard lots of things about affordable housing, but is it like if I went and tried to find an apartment in Ann Arbor, are you telling me I couldn't?
In my perspective, it is extremely difficult to find an apartment no matter your income, because it is so condensed and heavily focused in certain areas that is very markedly difficult, particularly because this 70-day enforcement is not, I would say, enforced. I think too, Elizabeth, you said this all wonderfully, but points I wanted to highlight is that the 70-day enforcement that is currently in place now is very well known amongst the students, as you can imagine, because they know that they're having their rights violated. However, this is anecdotal. I have not once seen it enforced, but I do know of more than, I would even say 20 instances of somebody having their house shown or being pressured into contract negotiations for next year. And this is a very, very, very popular thing that, as Elizabeth had pointed out, disproportionately affects our already disenfranchised and our low-income students, because as you can imagine, they're signing a lease and then they're signing their pre-contract and then they're signing all of these things, have a down deposit. There's a whole host of invisible fees that I can't even name off the top of my head. And then if their situation changes, they're now expected to pay those fees back, which, as you can imagine, can of course be devastating because that number can be in the hundreds to thousands. And just again, to further speak on Diana's piece of finding an apartment, even just again, anecdotally for my case, it took me about 4 months to when I was looking back at the start of the school year for my apartment that I'll be moving into in June to find a place that was not only, again, just sufficient, I'm picky, but just in general, the options were limited, the makeup of our city. So if anybody else has any questions about this as well, I'd be happy to speak on it as best as I can. I should also add that I do think that, Elizabeth, I think that you said that 240 days was the proposed number by the grad students. I personally think that that is more than fair because that encompasses, I would say, my math is correct, the school year. So they have the school year to enjoy their lease, and towards the end of their lease, they're having the opportunity to show their houses, and that would be an appropriate time to enter into the next year's lease negotiations.
Wow. Travis.
Yeah, thanks. So I actually, there's very little that I can add that Aiden and Elizabeth haven't already covered, other than, this is not just a new problem either. This is something that, I'm getting further and further away from my own graduation. This was a problem. This was a problem when I was a student on campus. And I actually believe, unless this is a new iteration, this 70 days may have actually been enacted when I was a student, because I know that there was significant talk. My freshman year, I was 6 weeks into classes and I was looking for new apartments with my freshman year roommate, because we were hearing from others that like everything was going to be rented out. If we didn't want to stay on campus, we needed to get moving. And so we signed into something really quickly. And then I believe it was either my sophomore year or junior, somewhere in there was some talk at the city level of regulating this. And what my recollection was, even then, in the like immediate aftermath of some date being set, that it wasn't being enforced, because we had, or like landlords were finding a way around it, where they were essentially saying like, we really encourage you to re-sign now, because otherwise you're going to lose out on all of these benefits that we would give you normally. And so like they were finding loopholes and things like that. So this has been an ongoing problem for years. And the window currently is just so short that I think particularly about like the students who have been here for a couple of years, they kind of learn the cycle, the unfortunate cycle that they get in. I actually got to the point where I would get my security deposit back from, or I would actually be putting a security deposit down before I could get my security deposit back. So as Elizabeth pointed out, you're stretched even further. So there was actually a benefit to re-signing, because generally as a student, your security deposit is probably a full month at minimum of your rent. And so you've got these massive security deposits, thousands of dollars. You're stretched on both ends. And I just think that you ultimately have the freshmen in particular who come onto campus and are just starting out in our city and are hearing immediately, unless you're going to stay in the dorms, you need to, like, the first thing you need to do is start panicking about housing for the next year, because otherwise you're going to be miles and miles off of campus. And that was absolutely the narrative my freshman year. And so this has been a problem that's been going on for a long time. And I'm really grateful that Councilmember Nelson is bringing it forward. So,
Linda.
So forgive me for asking this, but isn't this something that council could just go ahead and change right now? Why do you need the Human Rights Commission? It's a policy decision that you can make. Go ahead.
So suggested that HRC cared about. I don't know that it actually was something that was suggested that we have a serious discussion about it, because we were kind of substituting a number and it's fairly straightforward. The added wrinkle that is probably less relevant to HRC is I just had a conversation with our city administrator yesterday about they're talking about layering something else on top. I'm going to have to go back to Geo and ask them how they feel about this. They're talking about, because rental units are something that our sustainability department is really trying to find some hook to incentivize energy efficiency. They're wondering if they can piggyback off an ordinance like this and say, like, if you jump through these hoops related to energy efficiency or energy disclosures, maybe you can have a different timeline. Now, not like, I know, I'm like, wait a second. So first we have to educate the students about a new timeline, and then it's not just one timeline, it's two timelines. And how do they know? Like, I'm very skeptical. So but there are many conversations yet to be had around that particular topic. But yeah, Travis is hearing this for the first time because I pulled him in because I thought he'd be interested in it. But anyway, yeah, it may be that whoever brought it up and suggested you might be interested in, maybe they thought that you would just sort of pass a resolution of support or something. I don't know. Like, because generally speaking, we're just talking about extending the timeline, and it's fairly straightforward. It's not going to be real fussy. I think we're just unless we do the energy efficiency thing and then it gets way complicated. I think we're just swapping a number. I think that's all we're doing.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Judith, did you?
Yeah, I mean, if I'd be happy to support the city council to change that number, if that's what you need, like from us. That seems easy to do, but yeah.
And it does seem like it's ultimately an equity issue, as you suggested. Diana, did you? Okay. I don't know. I think you've got support, and now we need to know what you want.
Well, it was suggested to me that HRC might be interested. I mean, basically, like, perhaps this conversation is enough for me to come to say at the council table, like, Travis is my witness. Like, we talked at HRC about it, and we all agreed that it was really unjust for like people to be stretched with all of these deposits and payment. And everybody recognized this is an issue. It made sense as something that's harming the people we don't want to harm.
I mean, if it helps, and if it's possible, I mean, you could say that you have unanimous support from the HRC.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We could take a vote. Want to take a vote?
Shouldn't we, Leslie?
Sure. Somebody make a motion and state how you think this should be stated.
I move to support changing the number of days that are extending the number of days that landlords have before they can solicit potential lessors and support having city council make that change.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I would.
Opposed?
No, I would just say, Elizabeth, that maybe this is the moment in time for council to pass this, because, as you know, the association, if there is one, of owners of student housing have like a vice grip on and have for decades on students, and the balance of power is radical in favor of the owners. So if this is a moment for council to really stand up to that, you're going to get just heat from that association. And so I encourage you to act in this moment when you probably have a majority in council to actually pass something that shifts the balance a little bit more toward students.
Yeah, I was warned how scary the association was. Yes. I have never met them. They're the master in the closet, I guess. I did not know.
You may need the HRC to help you once you get the feedback from them.
Yes. Yes. But I think it is an equity issue, and it is not being fair to students. It does not sound like it's being fair to students, at least. And I'd like to see somebody do something. So I think we passed this unanimously. Am I correct? Just for the minutes. Okay. You have what you need, Elizabeth? Okay. Then we are at Commissioner Communications. If anybody has any announcements or anything they want to say before we close. None?
Actually, I do have something. Not to take over the meeting.
Sure.
So I found out that that Human Rights Commission project was nominated for the Provost like Innovative Teaching Award, which I'm really thankful that you guys let me do the project with you guys. And I've asked Leslie if she would write a letter of support on behalf of the commission, just stating that like it was a good experience. You guys would be open to doing it again. That's kind of what, you know, I'm a finalist. So they want to see, is this something that people enjoyed and did it benefit the community and benefit student learning? So Leslie asked if I would share that with you guys.
Yes, and I asked you all to give me input so I could add that to my letter, which I will have to write tomorrow. So please think about it tomorrow, and I will write it for you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Anything else before we close? Can we have a motion to close?
I
Adjourn.
move to close.
Adjourn, I think we.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second? Opposed? Thank you.